Hey, Greg Palast.
Hey, brother man.
Our old friend, investigative reporter with BBC News, Al Jazeera, The Guardian, author. His latest book, Billionaires and Ballot Bandits. His film, Vultures and Vote Rustlers, is now available on DVD. Greg Palast, PALAST.com is the website. Now that I've properly introduced you, sir, tell us about this incredible story that you're working on.
Yeah, for Al Jazeera, and you can read it at aljazeera.com. See it tonight at 9 p.m. on Al Jazeera. Mm-hmm. I've discovered a new way to purge voters, now 1 million of them. And I want to tell you something. According to 24 Republican secretaries of state and the expert Dick Morris on Fox TV, there are 3.5 million criminal double voters, people voting twice in 2 different states. Now, this is a heck of a crime wave, or it's a heck of a scam. And after 6 months of investigation for Al Jazeera, I was able to actually get a hold of the list of the suspects, 2.1 million names now in our possession, which we have gone through to see who these double voting skanks are. And it turns out, Tom, that there are exactly 0 double voters on the list. None. Wow. But there are 3 million people, overwhelmingly African-American, Hispanics, and Asian Americans who are at risk of losing their votes because they've been falsely accused of voting twice. Virginia alone, one single state, has already removed 41,000 people from the voter rolls. 500,000 are at risk in the battleground state of Georgia, 190,000 at risk in the battleground state of North Carolina. And this whole scam was generated in the battleground state of Kansas by the Republican Secretary of State, Chris Kobach, the kind of Catherine Harris of 2014.
How is this not a crime?
Well, they're claiming a lot of you guys, especially if you have a darker tint to your skin, are committing this felony crime. By the way, it's 2 to 10 years in the slammer for voting twice. But I got to tell you, we've gone through the list very carefully with a set of experts. Number one, we flew down to North Carolina where they've hired a famous ex-FBI agent, Chuck Stuber, who's had his 190,000 suspects for 6 months. He has their addresses. He has their phone numbers. He has their names, signatures, place of work, and he knows where they vote, of course. And he hasn't arrested a single person. And the answer is because no one on that list is actually voting twice. It's simply a list of common names like David Lee, Sue Park Kim, Jorge Rodriguez, Joseph Washington. The only match, the only thing that makes 2 voters, supposedly the same person voting twice, is the first and last name. It's been a big scam because the Secretary of State of Kansas, Kobach, who's in his own fight for his re-election life on Tuesday, has said they use Social Security numbers. There's not one Social Security number on the list. They say that they match middle names. There are 1.5 million people with mismatched middle names. In fact, I don't know. I'll show you this list here. If you can see it.
Wow.
It's random. This is random. Chris Jarvis Jackson is supposedly the same person as Chris Laquan Jackson in another state. There are 86,020 people named John Jackson. It is not 86,000 votes cast by one guy named John Jackson. But that's literally how they're running this list. I kid you not. I mean, it's so slapstick, you can laugh, except it could change the United States Senate, and it could easily change the presidency.
Wow. And this is actually, I don't think this is anything new, Greg. I mean, this is what Jeb Bush did with Catherine Harris in 2000 to get his brother within 500 votes of stealing an election. I mean, he knocked 80,000 African Americans off the voting roll. You were investigating that for BBC.
That was my story. Yeah, that was my story that's why I recognized this right off as soon as I heard about this, because I did the story in 2000 for BBC and The Guardian that Jeb Bush and Catherine Harris knocked off tens of thousands of black voters off the voter rolls just before the presidential race, calling them felons, criminals not allowed to vote. And by the way, very few people have asked me whatever happened to those criminals. It turns out the state of Florida said there were maybe 6 out of, in the end, 94,000 people, maybe 6 who voted incorrectly. And then they checked and they said, oh, no, actually, those 6 are allowed to vote too. Not one Not one illegal voter. And I'm looking at this list. I've asked the FBI agent in charge. I said, how many people have you arrested after 6 months? You've got their names and addresses and everything. Not one, not even a single recommendation of an indictment, because it's nothing but common names. And by the way, if the FBI can't find these people, I did. I went and found, let's see, there was James. Here we are. Kevin Thomas Hayes voted in Virginia. And he's supposed to be the same guy as Kevin Antonio Hayes, who voted in North Carolina. So I went and found this ne'er-do-well double voter, Mr. Kevin Antonio Hayes, in North Carolina. And I said, so have you voted in another state under using a different middle name? And he said, he was a little sheepish about it because his mother, he's a young man, his mother said angrily, he didn't vote at all in the last election. And sure enough, by the way, here's what's really sick. Right in the cross-check computer file, right in there, it says he didn't vote in the last election. So he's on a list of criminal double voters, yet they know that he actually didn't vote at all. And what they're doing is they're taking away the voting rights of tens of thousands, actually hundreds of thousands of minority voters, 41,000 in Virginia alone. Georgia won't tell us how many they've taken off. North Carolina won't tell us how many they've taken off. They're going through a process. They say, well, don't worry about it. We send people a postcard. If they sign off that they really are the right voter, they get to keep their vote.
That's caging.
Yeah, well, it's junk mail. People throw it out, and also, like a fifth of not only just list junk, but they've confused the addresses on about a fifth of the names, where they transpose the names and numbers, et cetera. So a lot of those cards are going to come back. In North Carolina, if your card comes back undelivered, you lose your vote automatically. You don't return your card, you lose your vote. Like I say, it's about a tenth. Will ultimately a tenth to a fifth.
So we're looking at a couple of million people who are going to lose their vote. If they have early voted, does their vote get removed? Is that the deal?
They're going to find out that they can't vote. They'll have to get a provisional ballot. And as you know, most provisional ballots just get
they're just placebo ballots.
Yeah, they make you feel good. They say, your name's on a list. Don't worry, you can vote on a provisional ballot. No thanks. Make sure you fight for that for a real ballot. But please, if you do get a card, if you have a common name and you get a card in the mail, don't ignore it, please. Because, but again, I went to Martin Luther King's old church, the King Church, Ebenezer Baptist in Atlanta, which was the center of this conspiracy of double voters. They have an old age home next to the church, African-American elderly. They, according to the cross-check system, 10 people in that old age home are criminal double voters. I found one, Mr. Naylor, who happened to have his Bible open on his kitchen table. He puts his hand on his Bible and he says, I swear I didn't vote twice. And in fact, he said he filed a sworn witness, a legal affidavit to get his vote back that he had to send off to the state of Louisiana, where they said he was voting as well as in Atlanta from the old age home. So what they're doing is that they're running people through a maze. It's like voter ID demand with bullets. And a lot of people are just not going to go through that, won't even know that they're on the list. It's another minority scrub. I saw it with the alien voters in 2012. Come on.
Yeah, it's amazing. Greg, can you stick around for a bit?
Yes.
Cool. Greg Palast is with us, investigative reporter with BBC, Al Jazeera, The Guardian, and our show, apparently. He says his latest book, Billionaires and Ballot Bandits, his film Vultures and Vote Wrestlers, is now out on DVD. You can find it all at gregpalast.com. Stick around.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Greg Palast on the line with us. Greg, I wanted to run a possible solution to some of this stuff past you. But first, I had one other question I wanted to ask you. What is the criteria that these Republican secretaries of state are using to determine who gets on this list of so-called double voter felons?
Well, as our expert in list maintenance told us, their criteria is crazy. It's literally if your first and last name matches that of another voter. There's an awful lot of Joseph Whites and Joseph Blacks on this list.
So basically what it's going after is common names.
It's going after common names. And here's the brilliance of it. It wouldn't matter if it was kind of pulling off millions of voters randomly. It would be ugly, but it wouldn't matter. The thing is, according to the United States Census, which tracks the ethnic breakdown of every single surname in America, by the way, which you can get, we use that. If you are a voter of color, the chance that you are using one of the 1,000 most common names in America is 80% higher than if you're white. So they know if they have a common name match system.
Right.
And this is going to get heavily minority lists. And like I say, it's only first and last name. I just, it's random. I'm looking at this goofy list.
Right.
William J. Johnson is supposed to be the same voter as William Edmund Johnson.
Wow.
So how many Bill Johnsons are there in America? Actually, there's 86,020 John Jacksons.
So here's my suggestion. First of all, a little backstory.
Okay.
Back in 2006, there were a couple of political scientists in the Michigan who were looking at the Michigan primary, and they wondered, could we increase voter turnout by pointing out to people that the fact of whether they voted or not is a matter of public record? And so they sent out mailings to a selected number of people. This was Hal Malchow who did this. The Times wrote about this back in 2010. And they sent out this letter to people saying, you are registered to vote. Here's your address, and here's the elections that you voted in, and we will update this list after the election and let you know whether your vote was counted or not, whether you voted or not. And by the way, here's the list of your neighbors, all the people on your block. So what it did is it brought social pressure to voting, and it increased voter turnout 10 times better. I'm quoting from the New York Times. The mailer was 10 times better at turning non-voters into voters than the typical piece of pre-election mail whose effectiveness has ever been measured. So A, that kind of social pressure works. B, it's being used right now. Democrats in New York State are mailing out a similar letter to registered Democrats saying, we're watching you, basically. Are you going to vote or not? And Republicans, or at least a right-wing group up in Alaska, is mailing out these things to registered Republicans in Alaska, knowing that these letters are going to cause people to vote. What if we took it a step further and said these lists will be published? We could create a website, gregpalastvotinginfo.com, and create a website, because this is all public documents, right?
It is all public, yes.
So that the day after the election, I can go on this list and I can see if my vote was recorded. And, it doesn't tell who you voted for, but it tells whether or not you voted. And it accomplishes two things. Number one, it brings that social pressure to people. Hey, everybody's going to know whether you voted or not, so I think I'll vote. It's going to increase the number of voters. But more importantly, I can see if they robbed me of my vote. What do you think?
That's why they're not going to do it, Tom.
Well,
people
I think the Democratic Party should do this.
Yeah, I think that they ought to.
Or maybe you and I should do this.
You know what's happening? The only where it's really happening is in the churches. That's why you have actually a place like Georgia, you have a higher African-American turnout than white turnout in elections as a percentage of eligible voters, believe it or not. With all the impediments, with all the scrubs, the fake felon scrubs, the fake double voter scrubs, all the IDs, all that stuff, still African-Americans are voting at higher levels because of souls to the polls. On Sundays before elections, people are growing in groups. Get in the church bus. And if you're not getting in the church bus, they're going to say, why aren't you getting in the bus?
Right. It's that social pressure that I was just talking about.
Exactly. And so, of course, they hate that. That's why Republicans are trying to stop early voting, because it means stopping the black church vote. They know it, and it's still happening. So they say, okay, well, we got another game. We can say all those people in the bus, they all have the same name. They're all Washington and Jackson. So let's just say they're all double voting. They're all the same person, right, and take away their vote. That's what this is all about.
Yeah, but wouldn't it be great if all the Mr. Jacksons on that bus could check the newspaper or check a website the day after the election and see if their vote counted?
Well, that would, that would also prevent a lot of the stuff. As you know, we have about 2 million votes a year are spoiled. That is, they're not counted because they're supposedly unreadable.
Right.
Because someone circled Al Gore instead of putting a check next to his name.
Right. And people don't know. They don't know if their vote was spoiled because they don't know that they can look this up as a matter of public record.
Yeah, well, for Oregon and New York will tell you, for example, if you have a provisional ballot that was actually counted. People fill out these ballots, they think they're counted, and you have a right to challenge if you're in Oregon, if your vote was chucked away. But we don't have that in the states that are these battleground states like North Carolina, Georgia, Kansas. This is where they're making it hard to even know if your vote counted. You're absolutely right. We want both social pressure and honesty. Good luck.
Right. Yeah. Well, this is where I think the Democratic Party might be interested. I don't know. I need to make a sales pitch to Barbara Boxer, I guess. Greg Palast, great work you're doing, my friend. You are brilliant. Thanks so much for dropping by today. Greg? Oh,
yep.
Okay.
See you tonight.
Thank you. Okay. You too. GregPalast.com. Be sure to check it out.